Hello everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar, The Pivotal Role of Digital Asset Management in the Digital Experience Platforms Landscape, hosted by Henry Stewart. Before we begin today's webinar, I'd like to quickly cover a few housekeeping items, and then I'll introduce our speakers and agenda before passing things over to our first presenter. So, a copy of today's webinar will be shared with all of the attendees tomorrow, as well as a recording of today's presentation. And if you have any questions, please submit them as they come to mind throughout the presentation. You can submit your questions in the questions box of the GoToWebinar toolbar, which should appear on the right-hand side of your screen. So joining us today, we're very pleased to have Anjali Yakkundi, who is a senior analyst at Forrester Research, as well as Davina Erasmus, VP of Product Marketing at Atom Software. I'll now quickly run through today's agenda. So up first, we are going to talk about the impact of digital on customer experience, followed by key characteristics of digital experience platforms, why DAM is a critical component of DXP, and some recommendations on how to get started with the DXP. And then we have time at the end for questions submitted by you throughout the presentation. So on that note, I'll pass things over to Anjali. You may begin.
Great, thanks so much, Maria, for the nice introduction. I'm excited to be here today to talk a little bit more about how DAM is fitting into this new landscape, because I think in the past many of us were sourcing and working with DAM as a silo, but more and more today I think we're seeing that DAM is becoming part of a broader landscape of technologies, and we're often no longer purchasing DAM only, but we're actually purchasing other technologies as well, and we have to make sure that DAM fits into it. But first, let's take a step back. I think, when it comes to digital experience and customer experience, I think we've all started to hear more and more about it. I know certainly if you've ever talked to Forrester in the past, Forrester is certainly pivoting towards this as well, because we truly believe that customer experience is going to be the true business differentiation for firms today. And I think for many of us who are on the phone today, we've started to see customer experience, the way that we reach and work with and create dialogues with our customer, becoming more and more important to our business. And in fact, Forrester data shows us that the vast majority of firms consider customer experience a critical business priority today. But I have looking at this data, one of the major questions that I have looking at it is, how are we doing this? Customer experience is important, and it's great to say that it's important and to start prioritizing it, but how are we actually going to do it? When we talk to firms, what action are they actually going to take to improve customer experiences? We found that when it came to digital customer experience, that the major improvement that we're seeing is all around digital. Digital is the top of the list of all of these customer experience priorities, with 55% saying that it's improving the online customer experience, 41% saying that it's adding or improving mobile customer experiences, and 39% saying that they're looking to improve cross-channel or omni-channel customer experiences where digital is a critical component. This is higher than all of these other in-person touch points. In fact, the top 3 priorities about customer experience improvements are all about digital. Digital is going to be critical. Yet when it comes to digital customer experience and how we're delivering it, it's going to be challenging, and in fact what we're seeing is that 54% of firms that we surveyed, that's over 1 in 2, so that they face many different technology challenges, saying that technology is actually their biggest barrier to successfully delivering digital customer experiences. This means that we could potentially be very successful. We're having great strategies, we have great content, we have great ideas for experience, but our technology has been getting in the way. And I think one of the primary reasons when it comes to these digital customer experiences that we're having so many challenges is because we have lots of different siloed content and data. If we think about every way in which we interact with a customer, whether it's when we're trying to acquire a customer, when we're looking to support a customer transaction, when we're looking for a support during a digital customer service phase or trying to promote ongoing loyalty, we're typically managing all of those different experiences in silos. And we're siloing not just our data, so how we're thinking about the customer and the data that we're collecting about that customer, but we're actually also siloing our content that's associated with each of those different experiences. And these content silos and these data silos are preventing us from delivering a very holistic customer experience that starts to reach customers at every phase of this journey. Because when customers discover us, we have a whole separate set of customer data and content. And that's not consistent with how we're delivering and supporting the customer during the transactional e-commerce phase of their journey. And that's different from the content and the data that we're presenting and that we have about the customer as we're trying to build some ongoing loyalty and build community with that customer. So all of these content and data silos are preventing experience. So that sounds, terrible, right? And it sounds like maybe the answer would be just to get one solution that could do all of this, right? If I could get a vendor who could manage every step in the customer journey, that one solution would manage all of my content, and all of my data. And that sounds great. Yet that's also not the correct answer here, because most firms that we talk to aren't looking to buy everything from one vendor. They're not looking for a suite, and they're not looking to aggregate all of their content and data into one suite so that they can manage and deliver experiences from there. So in fact, in a survey done earlier this year, we found only 7% of customers that we surveyed so that when it came to selecting a solution to deliver digital customer experiences, only 7% so that they prioritize getting components from a single vendor. Instead, the vast majority, over half, said they prioritized integration, and just under half said they prioritize using best-of-breed solutions. So firms want a more integrated data and content capabilities, and they're not necessarily looking for one vendor who's going to manage all of the experiences at every customer touch point. That's because if many of us on the phone, if we think about why we don't want to buy these big monolithic suites, it's because many of us already have existing investments in place in our organization. We might already have an email marketing solution, for example, that we know and we like and we're used to using. We may already have a commerce or a web CMS platform, so we don't want to replace that. And frankly, even if we were looking to replace all of our different components about how to deliver digital experiences, and we were looking for one vendor to do it all, there actually is no vendor on the market today, despite what some of the large vendors might tell you. So firms aren't looking to monolithic suites, but they're looking to solve some of their content and data challenges when it comes to delivering digital customer experience. This means that what firms are looking to do instead is build what Forrester calls digital experience platforms. This is essentially a framework, a solution architecture where we have content, customer data, commerce services, marketing as a service. And we're building all of these into an integrated environment so that it can be contextually delivered by delivery engines like web CMS or commerce platforms, delivered to every digital touch point. We call this the every glass or every digital screen, whether it is an email or campaign, a web or mobile experience, or emerging digital signage or point of sale. These digital experience platforms aren't a monolithic suite, but they're instead an integrated solution architecture where we can offer each of those core components around content, data, marketing, sales, and service, offer them as a service, and build a more microservices-oriented architecture so delivery solutions can combine those and think more about the presentation and rendering of these experiences. So what are some critical characteristics of these platforms? Clearly they have to be well integrated together, but what else? What else are we seeing being important about these solutions? There's a lot, but I think there's three really critical areas, especially as we think about DAM, that matter most when it comes to building digital experience platforms. The first is we have to think about solutions that are more cloud-enabled. Cloud-enabled solutions are going to give us greater agility and free up more resources so that we can start devoting instead those resources to building out our digital experience platforms, this solution architecture where we can better integrate and deliver experiences across solutions. There's lots of flavors of cloud. This doesn't necessarily just mean SaaS. In fact, it can mean other types of cloud as well. So not just that software as a service, but it could mean that we're putting the infrastructure, for example, in the cloud. We'll still have to manage our software application, and we're still going to have to manage upgrades and integrations, but at least we take some of that infrastructure burden and free up some additional resources. There's also the platform as a service model, really where we're having more help here, typically in a single tenant private cloud environment, where we can have some help managing the application so that our vendor is actually responsible for managing the software application in a more managed service model. And of course, there's SaaS as well. We're managing the solution in a shared multi-tenant environment. So there's lots of different ways that we can think about cloud, but I think something that's shared by all three characteristics, or excuse me, all three types or all three flavors of cloud, is that they help promote agility and help us alleviate some of the resource challenges so we can direct them instead to building and maintaining these platforms. The second characteristic of digital experience platforms is they have to be designed in a modular approach. So they really have to be a broader platform or system that's composed of these separate components that can be easily connected together. So we can also then easily add or replace different modules, whether it is that content or DAM module or the marketing or the delivery module, without impacting the rest of the system. So this very modular approach will help give us more flexibility in the future so that we're not tied to our legacy systems, but instead we can actually have more flexibility to swap in and out components when we have new needs or when we have needs that we want to be replaced with newer technology. The last characteristic of these digital experience platforms, besides this idea of cloud and modular standards-driven approaches, is that it's integrated together. When we think about these platforms, they have to be modular, but they also have to be sharing not just core content, but they have to be sharing their, not just their data, but they have to be sharing content so that all of these systems have access to content in that centralized place to ensure that we're managing a consistent set of content that's brand compliant, that's approved, and that the rights are intact. When we think about this content idea, this idea that we have to make sure that our platform has a core source for content and that's able to be easily distributed to our other components of our digital experience platform, DAM is going to become a very critical technology. It's a critical component that helps us really enable that creation, management, and retention of some of our most important assets, our rich media assets. Because these assets, like our images, our videos, who knows what's next, like our 3D or 4K videos, it's really, this is our most persuasive content. This is our content that's the most valuable in helping us engage with customers. So DAM is a really critical content technology in our digital experience architecture. It's going to serve as an important function in how we manage that rich media, that engaging content. So when I look at that architecture, it's going to be critical in driving content and serving up content to our solutions that will help manage our templates, our presentation, and our delivery of experiences. And that could be not just our web CMS, but it could be our social tools, our campaign management tools. It could be our email, our mobile solutions. It could be our commerce platforms. It has to integrate and serve up that content to those solutions that are more focused on delivery. That's really different than where many of us are today. Because today many of us are managing this content in silos. So for example, we might have some of our website content managed in our web CMS, maybe our more marketing-oriented material. We might have some of our partner or sales material managed in a customer-facing portal. We might have an e-commerce solution that's managing our product images or videos and serving up our rich media content for the shopping experience. And we might have other CMS. We probably don't have one CMS solution. We probably have multiple. We probably also have multiple campaign solutions and social solutions which are delivering experiences. And each of those solutions all manage content within them. We may also have other solutions, like emerging solutions like content marketing platforms or email, additional web CMS solutions. They're all managing their content in a silo. Silos, silos, more silos. So what DAM does is it takes all of those different content silos and it really centralizes content. So it can be served by solutions without having to worry, was this content on brand? Is it expired? Where else has it been used in our organization? It's really focused more on how do we manage that content and give different other solutions that are more focused on delivery of experiences. How do we give those solutions access? So in this model, DAM is really the content hub for your digital experiences and your content related to digital experiences. Whereas all of these other solutions are more bespoke. They're much more focused on that contextual presentation, authoring, and delivery. So this is where DAM really fits into that digital experience platform landscape. But that doesn't mean that DAM is just a parking lot. It can actually do more than just house or store and manage those assets and serve it up to those other solutions. It can actually do much more. It can also support some critical content processes in a centralized place. Things like content planning, content creation, workflows and collaboration processes. It can manage some of the content approval processes, both from the creative perspective, but also approvals from the brand manager's perspective or the legal perspective as well. So it can centralize that content approval process. It can also centralize how we're thinking about grouping content together and the process in which we're creating connections between our content. It can help us with content localization processes, like creating local variations of content and the workflows associated with that, or even integrate into translation workflows so that we can make sure our content is properly translated. And lastly, it can also help us centralize some critical processes around content archiving. So we're ensuring that we're properly archiving and expiring our assets. So DAM isn't just a system of record where we set our assets and forget about it. Actually, it's also a working system where we can manage some critical content processes, all the way from content planning and content approval to content localization and content archiving. So it's much more than a parking lot of solutions. It's a living, breathing system that we can use to manage much more than just a content management, but actually manage content processes. So DAM is clearly a critical component when it comes to our digital experience platforms because we're so reliant on content, especially rich media content, to create these engaging customer experiences. So where can you get started when you think about building digital experience platforms and implementing and integrating DAM into them? I think the first thing to consider when you're integrating and creating a digital experience platform is not to think of it as a monolithic software application. This isn't just that you'll go to one vendor, whoever it is, and you'll buy everything. You'll check all the boxes and you're done. This isn't a suite. Instead, this is more of a framework, a solution architecture, and a platform. It's not that one-size-fits-all monolithic solution. So when you get started with digital experience platforms, always keep that in mind because I think it's tempting to kind of buy into a vendor's vision, but no vendor is going to sell you all of these components, and no vendor has all of these components. And even if they did, you probably already have solutions in place that you can't afford to rip and replace. Once you do that, really define the breadth and scope of your platform. It's going to be different for all of us. If you are a financial services, a big bank, that kind of company, you're probably going to focus more in certain areas. You're not going to be selling products like a retailer, but you may need to incorporate your online banking systems, for example, into your digital experience platform. If you're a big B2B commerce or big B2B2C commerce organization, you might have more needs around content going to partners. If you're a consumer product goods firm, you might be prioritizing product content and product images. So all of us might have a specific breadth and scope of our broader digital experience platforms. And once we do that, once we understand what's the core focus of our platform, we can start to identify what are the core tenets, what's going to anchor our platform. For some organizations, it's all about commerce. If you're a retailer, those commerce solutions are really going to be the anchor tenant. If you're that consumer product goods firm, which is really focused on distributing out your products to other third-party sellers, content might be very critical because you're mostly concerned with your brand identity, and you're very concerned with how are you going to get all of this content out to your partners. So whichever components are really the critical anchor tenants, this is where you need to prioritize best-of-breed solutions. These are going to be the core foundation of your digital experiences, so best-of-breed capabilities are going to be very, very important here. For other areas, it's possible to start sourcing or bundling these capabilities together, things that are maybe more mature or commoditized, or things that are less important to your business. So if you're a financial services firm and not many people are using the website search on your .com experience, it might be worth bundling in search with your web content management purchase, for example. If you're looking at a DAM solution, it might be worth looking at who are the partners of your existing solutions so that you can source them together if it makes sense, if it's not maybe a core tenant or if there's a strong best-of-breed component. So this is where you can get started with digital experience platforms. But I want to backtrack for a minute because when I think about digital experience platforms, I think there's a big elephant in the room. When I think about all those different components around marketing services, commerce, customer data, content, customer service, all integrating with authoring, presentation, templating tools, isn't integration going to get messy? And I didn't give you any recommendations about that, because integration for many of us is going to be the most challenging technology barrier. I certainly think this is going to be the most challenging, but there are ways to alleviate that burden of how you're going to deliver integrated digital experience platforms with DAM as a critical component. I think the first and foremost is really to remember to consider those modular DAM solutions. This is going to give you deeper system flexibility so that you're not tied to solutions, but you can easily find and replace different components. So to help alleviate that integration burden, consider those more modular-oriented DAM solutions. And consider DAM solutions that have invested and prioritized in integration, particularly with open RESTful APIs. In addition, you'll also want to prioritize DAM solutions that have accelerators or package connectors with solutions you already have in place. So what are some of the critical investments you've already made? And do those vendors have critical DAM partnerships? Because that'll help alleviate the burden, because not only are they investing in joint integration, but they may also be investing in things like a joint vision and joint strategy, maybe even some joint development. And this is going to bode well so that you can do things like stay on an upgrade path for when you're managing these connected solutions, because nothing is worse than having a solution, wanting to upgrade it, but you can't because it's going to break an integration that you've already created. So consider those vendors that are using partners to help them with creating these joint roadmaps and how they're going to maintain that connector as you upgrade. And lastly, this is going to be challenging to do on your own. So remember to investigate your DAM Solutions Services Partner Network so you can find resources to help. Looking at system integrator and digital agency partners who have expertise here will help you alleviate some of that burden because they'll be able to provide you the expertise and resources to manage some of this integration. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Davina, who will talk a little bit more about Adam's point of view in this space. And feel free to ask questions in the chat box on your screen, or always feel free to reach out as well.
Thanks, Anjali. So I just want to keep building on what Anjali's been talking about because, there's a lot of discussion around how you build a DXP and, the kind of components you need to have in those systems. And we believe as providers of DAM, but also just in looking into the DXP and looking into the things that our customers are trying to create using digital experience platforms, that DAM really does play a pivotal role in putting these experiences together. We really see that building digital experiences is crucial. I think everyone sees that now. It's really the most important piece of maintaining your image and being able to connect with customers in that micro moment when they're looking maybe at your product or at your brand and trying to decide whether to go with it or not. And the problem is that if you get this building of the experience wrong, what you do is create a lot of noise, which could lead to more confusion. And what you really don't want to be doing is introducing any confusion at the point in time where someone's looking at, your product or your brand and trying to make that decision of yes or no. So it's really important to get this right and to ensure that you can put everything into building the right experience. But it's quite challenging to put a good digital experience together. It's quite challenging to understand the complete customer journey and make sure that you have just the right content at just the right moment that really speaks to the customer at that point in time. It requires flexible orchestration and collaboration. It really requires you to be able to pull processes together, pull systems together when you need to, and be able to collaborate across functions and across internal and external divisions, and bring the right information, the right expertise together to build the right experience. And all of this is held together by a good content strategy, because at the end of the day, what we're trying to do is to connect with the customer so that we can make this impact with them of this is the right product or this is the right brand to go with right now. It's not just creating an experience, it's creating experience towards that specific goal. And I really like this diagram from Content Strategy Inc. because I think it really summarizes exactly what you need to be doing in order to be able to focus the messaging you're creating. Starting from the top going down, being able to say this is the impact I'm trying to create at exactly that micro moment, exactly the moment that person is faced with a choice. And this is the outcome I want to get out of that moment. But what's really interesting for me in this diagram is when it comes to methodology, talking about the two sides of it, talking about the audience needs, but also the employee needs. Because what we see as companies get better at being able to create digital experiences and put together an experience that they think will really resonate is that they need to improve on the employee side as well, actually on the supporting organization side, whether it's actually employees of the organization or external resources as well. And it's really about being able to become more efficient at being able to create the content and everything that needs to back up that experience, but also being more effective in creating the right content as well. So I think it's really a very good model in bringing in those other pieces like people and processes, the metrics and measures, and being able to use that to drive what you're building and the tools and technology, as we've just been talking about, on the DXP itself. Apart from, of course, being able to understand the customer and build the content in the right way as well. So what we call this internally is the perfect storm. It's being able to create this agility to innovate, and it's really about being able to connect processes so that you can work across functional areas, not having to drop different requests into different silos, but being able to work across all the functional areas towards one goal. It's also about being able to create that micro moment purposed content, so content that really is recognizing what it needs to be used for and when it needs to be used, and actually how it should behave in different channels as well. And next to that, you need to put the right people together at the right time. It's about being able to collaborate across channel, but it's also about being able to very quickly pull a team together to work together, and then again move them back into what they were doing, into the units they come from, so that you can keep on creating the right experiences by pulling the right people together. So it's all towards creating that synchronized journey that you're trying to create for customers. So you need to ensure that your DX platform isn't just a number of pieces put together, but that it's actually fitting your business needs, and that it can adjust to your changing needs, because when you put a platform together looking at what you need right now, within a month, within a week, sometimes within a day, you have changing needs. You have new technologies, you have new things that you need to be able to work with, and therefore you need to be able to be flexible in the system and be able to add things as you go along as well, so that you can actually prepare for what's coming. So how does DAM help you to make this reality? I started with one of the most, the core principles that we talk about a lot in the DAM industry, and that is the question of the single source of truth. The DAM is, of course, the single source of truth. It is the central repository of all your assets, but it's more than that in the DXP. It becomes your single source of truth to the forward-facing units as well. It's a place where all the content, all the assets, but all the content on the assets is maintained, and everyone who's trying to make use of an asset towards an experience or towards a forward-facing channel, for example, knows that when they pick something out of the single source of truth, it's going to be accepted, it's going to be approved, it's going to be the right piece of content to be used right now. It's also the place to localize content. Most people have different needs of content in different regions of the world, even in different segments, customer segments. So it's a place to be able to create localizations of your assets, localizations of the content on the assets, and to record the localizations and the variations that have been used and where they've been used. So you can really start to make this a two-way conversation in terms of being able to place content onto the system, but also be able to record how it's been used and to have an audit trail almost of all the things that have been used in the different channels as well. And I just brought, I wanted to highlight this with an example that is actually quite actual for myself right now, looking around at the season we're in, the fall season, or for me the autumn season, and thinking about things I want to be doing at home, going in and actually being able to see, different experiences that are all synchronized actually across, social, website, but also across web to print, so brochuring as well, and ensuring that, you can have localizations on maybe pricing of items, all the way down to what items are actually available within that specific region. So I think it's really important to be able to pull all of that together and to maintain it out of that single source of truth. The second thing that I think a lot of DAMs also talk about, that we do talk a lot about in the DAM industry, is being able to orchestrate agility. Because the DAM is a logical place to orchestrate. And when we talk about orchestrate agility, we're really talking about being able to enable temporary units, so being able to deal with the fact that you're working on projects and project teams don't sit together forever, and that you would be using people from different functional groupings in the organization, that you can pull them together to work together temporarily, that you can focus the talent into creating great things and not in separate directions in their own silos, but still maintain integrity. And you do this by really creating shared views or shared workspaces within the DAM, where you can have ad hoc or temporary teams be able to have access to the same content, follow the same process together, and be able to produce great shared experiences just by the fact that they're working together within one space and already have access to all the content, can see how things have been created and how things are working together as well. And the example I have here is just a quick look into our system, where you can see that two different users have two different views. So on the left-hand side, you see a user who is using it from a channel point of view and has a different experience to a more power user who comes into the system on the right-hand side of the screen. And what that does is both of them are having access to the product campaign Explode launch. And when they go through, you can see that although they have access to the same assets, they have still, first of all, their own experience of how the assets are being presented to them, but also the integrity of the system is maintained in terms of who is able to have access to which assets, and what kind of content you can see in the filter section on the left-hand side of the two screens, what kind of how they're able to access the content, how they're able to work through the content, find content, and actually also which of the content they can actually access. So it's important to be able to create these spaces where people can come together but still maintain the integrity of your system and your content by being able to apply the rules that go on top of content, but also are following the processes in place to manage the creation of content as well. The third thing is really about being able to connect your ecosystem. as Anjali was saying, there are just so many parts to an ecosystem, to a digital experience ecosystem, and there's just more and more components being added. So it's really important to be able to connect them easily, connect them in a way that the different systems can actually send data out in the way that they are working with data and receive data back in the way that they need to receive it, so they can very quickly take the data and move on to using it or to doing something else with it. So it's important there to ensure that you can actually use some standard integration points in your DAM to be able to connect the two systems together. So we're looking at things like REST APIs, which has become a reasonable standard within the industry of being able to integrate against, and whether there are extension models in place to allow you to be able to create lightweight or abstracted extensions, so that you don't go into the deep code and into the deep connections of the product, but are able to connect on very standardized extension outputs or levels as well. And things like ETL tools that make it much easier to connect without having to customize, and make it much more standard and uniform in being able to get data in and data out. Also look for ways to be able to standardize or abstract the formatting of the syntax, so really that you can actually create multiple connections with the least product impact. So there I mean really being able to look at how do I create validations on content to allow the transformation of content from the one system to the other that doesn't have to go into deep into the DAM, but actually can be done on a layer just above it, or using the REST APIs, for example, or pushing it into an ETL tool as a layer just before the DAM, so that you don't create that deep connection, which means that you can always update and upgrade your DAM. You can always upgrade the other system as well, but maintain that that connection, so that the content comes through and that you get that updating of the content, so you always have the right content at the right time. And really what I'm looking at in terms of being able to integrate the ecosystem is being able to pull together things like your partners who are using your content, are being able to use, are using your system to be able to take content out and build on further with it, but also towards retail channels as well. And I found this example, which I thought was really good, is the Lego Asset Portal, where they talk about how they support the process and really pulling together the integration with merchandising guidelines, key insights that they get from different systems, together with the assets, together with the channels that they work with, being able to pull all of that together to create the experience eventually on the website and the experience eventually for the customer as well. So I think that's a really good example of how to pull the different pieces together. And then I just wanted to show an example, a typical example of an architecture or how we see the ecosystem of most of our customers in terms of the complexity that is in there, and the kind of synchronizing and orchestrating role that DAM plays in this, and being able to get information in and become a collector of all the different pieces of information, so that it can be taken out with certainty in terms of this is really the right content, it has been approved, it has been updated, it's the right content to be used towards the forward-facing channels. And the last one I wanted to talk about is being able to work with content that speaks for itself. It's a term that I've started to use a lot recently, because I think as we are building digital experiences and as we focus more on the experience part of it and on the journey creation part of it, it becomes less interesting to have content per channel, but actually content that has information on it that can be used to determine what to do in a specific channel. Content that contains information that that allows the asset itself to speak for itself when it's being used in different channels, so that if you need to suddenly use a piece of content in a different channel or in a different way, that you can draw on what is already within that asset to determine how to use it and what to use it in. So for example, think here in terms of metadata or data enrichment that contains information like pricing that is different per location, or maybe views that are different per requesting channel, so that it all exists within the one asset, but is actually being used differently depending on the kind of channel or the channel that is calling for it at that point in time. So in conclusion, I just wanted to reiterate, DAM can really make it easier to create synchronized experiences, and the most important role it plays is actually being able to bring the people, the systems, and the processes together to create that content that knows when, where, and how it can be used. So to be able to take content and give it another life and being able to go out there and connect to the channel and actually react differently based on who's calling for it, where they're calling for it, and when they're calling for it. DAM takes that really pivotal role in making all of that possible. And Maria, I'd like to hand back to you.
Great, thank you so much, Davina. So on that note, I'd like to remind all of our attendees that you can still submit questions in the questions box. It should be on the right-hand side of your GoToWebinar toolbar. So I'll just leave another 10 seconds or so to see if we have any questions come in. Okay. We seem to have a little bit of a shy audience today, but that is fine. If you have any questions, actually, if we can just go to the next screen, that will show our contact information. You can always send us questions after the webinar through our website, email, through Twitter. You can even watch some videos that we have on YouTube as well for more information. So on that note, Davina and Anjali, did you want to add any closing statements or add to anything that you've said today?
Yeah, this is Anjali. I think I think a lot of what Davina said echoed some of the areas that we at Forrester firmly believe as well. And please feel free to reach out to us as well. I think you saw my contact information. If any other questions come up as well, happy to chat offline.
I think the same for me as well. Just if anyone would like to have discussions, regardless of product, in terms of the direction of DAM and the way that this comes together in the DXP, of course, our details are out there. Please contact us.
Great. Thank you so much again, Anjali and Davina, for that very informative presentation. Really appreciate it. I'd like to thank everyone for joining us today. And in respect of everyone's time, I'll go ahead and close today's webinar. So thank you very much. Take care.